Yeah, there'll certainly be lots of memories and moments to reflect upon during the course of President Zuma's presidency, which appears to be coming to an end. We still have in studio Senior Research Fellow and Political Economist at Trade Collective, Lebohang Pheko. Thanks very much for joining us. So we had the press conference and then we had this interview a short while ago with Aldrin Sampear and the Secretary General. Do you think he was able to clarify matters a little bit more, or are we still where we were before?
No, it wasn't clear at all. I mean, the only thing that's clear is that there's a lot of confusion, and I think there's still some divided forces even within the NEC and the decision-making body. I hope that they're united on the fact that Mr. Zuma must go, but they don't seem certain as to whether he will. And so I think that his language was just of, hedging bets somewhat. So we're going to get a response, but I mean, what does a response mean? Does that mean, yes, I'm leaving, I'm packing my bag, and here's your laptop, thank you, South Africa? Or actually, no, I think I'm going to stick around and introduce Mr. Ramaphosa to the world as though the world doesn't know him, and as though Mr. Ramaphosa is not known by the relevant leaders in business and politics globally and regionally.
So, of course, then the speculation might be then, what did he need the 3 to 6 months for?
The cynical answer would probably be to, continue to clean up the country and to perhaps visit Saxonwold a few more times. Who can really tell? Close the nuclear deal. Who can actually tell? I think that I would view, given his 183 charges of corruption and racketeering, I would view his attempts to elongate his stay in office with a lot of suspicion. Possibly to cover his own tracks, possibly to take a few more doorknobs as he exits the building. It's hard to tell with Mr. Zuma, but I don't think that there's any need for him to linger around any longer when clearly the balance of forces which Mr. Magashule alluded to, the material conditions, would seem to indicate that the ground is not, the ground beneath him is very shaky. And also that, of course, public opinion has been against him. People have been marching for over a year. I think that the wave of sentiment in his favor has waned completely.
And I suppose one of the things that keeps being asked, and we're not sure we're getting a proper answer, is have they got a definitive answer as to why they're recalling President Zuma? And at the back of that, had Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma won in December, would we be in this situation of still recalling Jacob Zuma because of these centers of power?
So that's interesting. I doubt, I'll start with the second one first. I doubt very much whether Dr. Dlamini Zuma would have instituted these proceedings. If she had, it would only have been for strategic purposes, perhaps to be seen to be sweeping out the old, to be seen to provide a semblance of being independent and not being an extension of Jacob Zuma. But other than that, I doubt that it would have been with the same kind of gravitas or urgency. Now, in terms of what this means and what the ANC now needs to set about in releasing Mr. Zuma, there are two sort of processes or three sort of processes or perspective. The one is a personality perspective, and I think that's what's at play here, is that the constitution of the ANC, neither constitution of the ANC and really of the South African constitution have allowed for personality politics. And I said this previously, that the constitution of the ANC was laxly applied in relation to Mr. Mbeki, and of course he was a gentleman. And remember that the two centers of power, this isn't the first time we've had them, because Mr. Mandela, there was a moment at which Mr. Mbeki was party president, and yet Mr. Mandela was still the state president. And to all intents and purposes, it was understood that this was a succession plan. So the personalities at play have a huge amount to do with it. Secondly, the institutional processes within the ANC, which clearly are found lacking. So what they've used now is the idea of deployment. And yet there are some subsections, I don't have them at hand, but there are subsections which talk about bringing the party into disrepute. I mean, they're very vaguely and broadly worded, so they almost look like and seem like an attempt to deal with political problems and to sweep them out of the ANC door. So, bringing the party into disrepute, not being a disciplined cadre, speaking against the party, all of these sorts of things. And as I mentioned previously, the last time we saw that revoked was when Mr. Malema was and a few of his cohorts were asked to leave the ANC. So they don't really have a strong sense of. So this whole deployment is, again, it's very fuzzy, and I think that the ANC needs to set about the hard business of ensuring that its own internal governance is very clear in relation to the moment, when the moment comes, and if the moment comes again, that a party, that the head of the state and the party are no longer in coalescence and are no longer in concert with each other. How do they part ways in a way that doesn't cause a country crisis, a constitutional crisis?
Wouldn't the simplest thing be to contract that period between the National Elective Conference and the end of the term of the state president?
A year and a half. So in other words, perhaps have the conference a year.
Months,
So in other words, if we'd been going into this if we'd gone to Nazareth this year, it would have just been a couple of months. That might be a possibility. I mean, because in other countries as well, I mean, I think Namibia had a similar crisis where, you know, the party president and the state president, were, which was then still Nyoma, were two different people, and when the kind of ridiculous, farcical images of the two limos and who's going to enter first, you know, really it was kind of petty caricatures like that. But I think in terms of the substance of also separating state business from party business, it's a very important delineation. These sorts of moments, as difficult as they are, you know, we shouldn't allow this. We shouldn't waste this crisis, and the ANC shouldn't waste this crisis. It must learn, and you know, if ever there was a moment for them to take this notion of self-correction that they keep on talking about, it would probably be now. This would be a good moment to outsource some expertise which is able to look at their constitution and avoid this, because this happened 10 years ago, almost to the month, and yet again they're in this situation. Surely, if you're going to self-correct, this is a good moment to do so.
As you talk about self-correct, we're going to pause for a moment for the time being, and we'll start to explore the next steps, perhaps the next 24, 48 hours next week in just a moment, because what we'd like to do now is go back to Luthuli House, where Aldrin Sam